Welcome to this week's episode of Here We Journey with Pastor Greg. I know I didn't post last week a new episode, and it's because I was in thought about some things. I was thinking about what was going on in our world. We certainly last episode talked about racism, and that was inspired. I shouldn't say inspired, but that was because of the events in Buffalo. And less than a week later, the nation was once again jolted awake, hurt, disturbed, whatever emotion you want to describe, due to the killing of 19 children in an elementary school in Texas. Now, we're going to talk about shootings. So, if you are listening to this with kids in the car, or this is something that might disturb you, this is your warning that this is going to talk about some pretty heavy things. It's going to talk about violence in schools. The Columbine shooting happened in April of 1998, my junior year of high school. It was the spring semester. I remember, and I have some memory issues because of the brain surgery that I had. I don't have always the best recall of memories, but I can almost always pull up the memory I have of that day when the events of Columbine happened. Getting a little tongue tied already. I remember I got out of school, and that day I had to work. So I went to my job, which was at a local community center. I was one of the kind of maintenance slash cleaning guys. And I remember I walked in, checked in with my supervisor, and I remember seeing a bunch of people that were there to work out staring at the TV in the weight room. I paused to look, and that's when the first images of Columbine hit me. I remember seeing kids my age, my peers, running from a building. I remember as news started to come out about what happened on that day. I remember, again, being in high school, the conversations about black trench coats. I had a black trench coat. I had it, I think I got my freshman or sophomore year. And I loved wearing it. I really enjoy that style of coat. But if you remember the stories, the black trench coat at Columbine, that's part of the story. That's part of the images that come to mind. And like I said, I remember these things. And I remember over the course of the weeks after that, the number of fake phone calls, or at least we were told that they were fake, of bomb threats, of threats against the school that came in, and us having to do evacuation drills. This was back in the day where they would want us to leave and get out, and that was the drill that we practiced. It was shortly after that that the approach changed to what it is now. But this was 1998. I was a junior in high school in a small town in Texas. It made me think, I remember thinking that there's no way this would happen here, right? Like, I was still in that mindset of, oh, we're just a small town in Texas. So small. There's one high school. My graduating class was 242 students. So, not as small as some. But I remember even after Columbine, there was a period where it wasn't uncommon to at least see gun racks in the back of trucks because it was hunting season. I remember these things. And then we fast forward to 2022 in Uvalde, Texas, in southern Texas, near San Antonio. Happens. This one hit home for me too because I have friends that are teachers in that part of Texas. I went to a college just outside of San Antonio where there were students from Uvalde. I remember driving through and seeing signs for that town as I was driving home up to the panhandle of Texas on various breaks during the semester. So this one felt even closer to home this time. And I think of my friends that are teachers, and I see what they have said. After every shooting, every incident of violence that happens at schools, and I see what they say. And I hear the desperation and the worry and the concern and the weariness in their voices. But what do? Will we do anything? Like I said, Columbine happened in 1998, 24 years ago, roughly. And have we done really anything to address this? Have we really done anything to make these things a thing of the past? Have we really done everything we can to keep the kids safe? I have three kids. One just celebrated her 5th grade graduation. The other one just celebrated his pre-K graduation. My oldest has already gone through various active shooter, or actually they're calling them intruder drills. She can tell me what she's supposed to do. And she's 11. She's 11. And of course, as a parent, I want to sit here and think, oh, there's no way it will ever come that close. And yet, the scary part is, I bet you the parents in Uvalde thought the very same thing. We're in Texas. Everyone respects guns and knows how to use them right, and no one would ever misuse a gun, right? We're all good guys with a gun. And yet, those events happened. What do? What can we do? And are we willing to do it? You see, on our journeys through life, we have to think about these things. We have to comment on. We have to speak. We have to speak out. We have to address what's going on. If we really value the lives of children, we need to start acting that way. Now, what is it that we can do? There's been a lot of arguments, a lot of debates, and that's why nothing gets done. Is we are too busy debating. We are too busy fussing and worrying about the Second Amendment. Now, I am no constitutional lawyer, and I know there's been lawsuits trying to help define what the Second Amendment means. And I am not advocating for all guns to suddenly disappear from America. I mean, part of me is, right? Like, part of me thinks, well, the easiest way to handle this is just get rid of them. Get rid of all of them. I'll be honest with you, there is a part of me that thinks that. And yet, I recognize that's probably not going to happen. So, what can we do? How can we address this while also recognizing the Second Amendment? And just for a brief second, let me say here, for whoever may be listening to me that is a Second Amendment proponent, at all cost defender. When did the Second Amendment supersede our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? It often seems when we get into these types of discussions and debates that the Second Amendment above all else must be protected, even life. That thing that's mentioned in the very preamble of the Constitution, that the Second Amendment is an amendment to. But again, I'm not a constitutional lawyer. What can we do? So I did a little bit of research. Again, I am a pastor, I am a father, I am a husband, I'm a concerned citizen. I am not claiming to be an expert. I am recognizing the limitations of my own knowledge. But this is what I feel. This is what I think. As a pastor, I promote love. Jesus calls us to love one another. To love one another as ourselves. To love our neighbors as ourselves. And if we love our neighbors, that means those kids and the almost 50 million kids in public schools that around 95% undergo intruder drills at least twice a year. And if you really want to see something heartbreaking, just look up preschool and kindergarten teachers explaining how they work with the kids to understand the intruder drill and what they need to do. My heart breaks actually a little bit for my son, who is getting ready to enter into kindergarten and will probably for the first time really experience that. What can we do? How can we love? What I was saying is, if we love our neighbors, those kids that undergo those drills, they're our kids. There are kids that we need to be worried about. We need to worry about the impact, even if they're not at a school where something like this occurs. The possibility is never too far from their mind. It's probably similar to those that had to undergo drills for nuclear weapons, or during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the drills that sometimes had to happen at schools. Those are our kids. So I wonder, and I was having a conversation with one of my friends from high school who is a firearms advocate, and he's someone that looks at stats. He teaches stats at a collegiate level. He's wicked smart when it comes to these things. And he approached it in that mindset because I brought up, well, what about Japan? What about Australia? These countries that had something like this happen, implemented some laws, and then they stopped happening. Imagine that. And he raised one, I think, valid caveat is those are island nations. Yes, Australia is huge, but it is an island. So there's a little bit more control about what comes into the country than maybe we have here in the States. That's a conversation for another day. So I looked at some other European countries and I came across Sweden. Now, part of my family's from Sweden, so it was one of the first ones I Googled just to see what their laws were. And it's interesting. Per capita, Sweden has a pretty high gun ownership rate that's somewhat similar or equivalent to what we have here in the States. They're not an island country, although they have some water around them. But even though they have a high capita of gun ownership, they don't see events, the same events that we see countless times and that we are all growing tired of seeing. It makes me think, well, why is it? Is it part of the culture? Yeah, probably. We have a heart issue, I think, here in America. We have toxic, hyper toxic individualism where we don't always care about our neighbor. We certainly don't love our neighbor. It's always me, myself, and I, or me and my family, me and mine. Hyper toxic individualism. We need to address that. Yes, we also need to address the mental health system at large. Starting with the fact that it's okay for you to have Jesus and a therapist. And seeking mental health just as accessible and everyday as seeking medical health. Of course, medical health, that's another conversation too that we could get into. But make it more everyday. Remove the stigma that can come with even slightly seeking help. Remove that stigma, especially for people that look like me, right? On top of that, when we look at Sweden, they do have some pretty strict ownership laws. They have things like you can only own 12 guns, or is it 16? I don't have my sheet of notes in front of me right now. But they have a cap on the number of guns, and not only do they have a cap on how many, but they have a cap on certain types of guns. You can only own X number of handguns, of rifles, and anything above that number. You have to go through a long, intensive process to get approved. So let's say you are like a gun collector, like historian. You have to go through a lot of effort to get approved for more. There is also a requirement for, I think it's handguns, that you are a member of the local shooting club. And there is a year-long training. Think about that. Yes, there are. That's some extra steps. That's not a immediate purchase and have in your hands. There's a process. In America, we are all about, in many ways, instant gratification. If I go out and buy something, well, I want to be able to walk out of the store and have it. I don't want to have to go through a process to finally get it. We want that immediateness, that immediate fix of owning something. But could we approach it in a similar way? Or could we simply treat guns the way we treat cars? Licenses, permits, insurances. Insurance. Imagine having to carry insurance on your gun if it was used to hurt an innocent person, to take an innocent life. Or, what about this as a first step? Every gun you purchase, you have to pay a fee that goes into a fund that helps those that have been victims of public shootings, active shooter situations. What about that? What about if there was a way for that fund to also help cover the funeral costs that these families now had to cover? Now, I'm sure there are other people, other funds, other organizations that probably help that some. But what if there's something tied to gun ownership that requires contributing to a fund of that nature? Again, you're still free to own a gun. But there's still some of these other jumps. And before anyone comments on this podcast and says, well, we own guns because of self-defense or to, if we need to defend ourselves from the government or invaders or, all right, you know what? You're not going to like what I'm about to say. I call BS on that. Which one of you is going to go out and buy the tank? Which one of you is going to go out and buy the fighter jet? Because let's be honest. I don't care what kind of gun you have at home. If you are really going to have to go up against the United States military, or heck, almost any global military from a first world nation, which would be more than likely what would attack America, you're going to be outgunned. Your little pea shooter is not going to take down a tank. It's just not going to happen. So let's get over that delusion right now. And if you're pointing to that, well, Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia. When was the last time you went out on military drills? I don't have a whole lot of patience, if you can't tell, when it comes to that argument of owning a gun. I am much more willing to accept that you're a hunter and you like to go out and hunt, especially if you're hunting and you're eating the food that you bring down. Or you know what? If you like going to a gun range to shoot off a couple bullets and, do some target practicing, more power to you. I have no problem with that. You like to go clay shooting? Okay. Hey, have fun. Be safe, but have fun. No problem. But this idea that whatever arsenal we have at home is going to be able to help take down any government, any military, is a bunch of hogwash. I said it. I know there's probably people that heard that disagree with me, and that's okay. You don't have to agree with me on everything. It's fine. This is my podcast, so, I'm the one with the mic. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's okay to disagree with me. But what are we going to do to protect the kids? How are we going to act? How are we going to take this moment, the days and weeks following the event in Uvalde? Are we going to let the cycle continue? Mass shooting, thoughts and prayers, outrage. We forget about it. We forget. Another mass shooting. Out. Do nothing. Are we going to continue that cycle that we have more or less been on since 1998? Look how we treated the kids from Parkland that were speaking out, that were trying to make change. Look how they were treated. Look how they were villainized by a lot of people. Is that going to be what happens this time around? Oh, wait. There's not a lot of survivors from that classroom left. There's a few. Are we going to mourn, grieve, and wring our hands and say, well, we ought to do something, but, and continue on? And then the next time it happens, maybe it impacts someone you love dearly. Will that be enough? What and when is enough? I know a lot of people, I've seen it on Facebook, I'm sure you have too, that are very angry, very upset, very disturbed that yet again this has happened. And I get it, I'm there too. I said this on TikTok. Pastors, funeral directors, there's a few other professions. There's those of us who have had to sit across a table in an office room. I've done it on the front porch of my house and had to help someone plan the funeral for their loved one that just died. I've gotten the phone calls. Pastor, why? Pastor, if only. What did I do? What more could I have done? All those questions. There's those of us that have sat in that place with people. And until you've sat in that place, you don't know what that's like. So many, the vast majority of the world does not sit in that place. Yeah, we all suffer loss. We all try to comfort each other when we have lost a loved one. But there are certain professions, funeral director, pastor, some medical people, hospice care, that are there at ground zero, having to help families pick up the pieces, mourn, work through their grief so that they can face the next day. Heck, sometimes the next day isn't what's on the radar. Maybe it's just the next hour. And when you sit in those places, it gives you a different outlook. It gives you insight. It puts things in perspective. That very few politicians, very few lobbyists were ever ever feel or understand. Oh, thoughts and prayers. You know what? When you're sitting across the table from a grieving loved one, especially after a sudden and unexpected death, your thoughts and prayers don't mean diddly squat. They just don't. They don't take away the pain. They don't take away the sorrow. They don't provide comfort. Whether you think they do or don't, they don't. Thoughts and prayers. You know what? Especially in cases like this of violence, action and change speak a whole lot more than thoughts and prayers. Those two things can bring about a whole lot more comfort than thoughts and prayers. Oh, thoughts and prayers. I'm a pastor. I believe there is power in prayer. I have seen that there is power in prayer. I spent a lot of time in prayer. But yet, in those moments, yeah, I'll offer to pray. But usually, one of the first things I tell them when someone comes to me, and even during almost every one of my funeral sermons, I have said this phrase in one way or another, that this sucks and it's not fair and it's upsetting. We don't want to be here. And acknowledging that. Now, I've been fortunate. Most of my funerals that I've dealt with have been because of medical situations. But that same truth applies to situations of violence. But what we can do is take the next step and say, not only is this not fair, not only does this suck, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to research and learn and read more and try to understand. I am going to reach out to my elected officials. I am going to take a stand and add my voice to those that are saying this must stop. In Congress, elected leaders, national leaders, you need to figure out a way to make this stop. We're sick and tired of it. It needs to come to an end, and it needs to come to an end yesterday. And we're not going to take it anymore. We got to flip some tables on this. Oh, but Jesus is all about compromise and love. Yes, all about love. And Jesus loved the money changer whose table he flipped over. Jesus loved the Pharisee that he challenged and told was wrong. I'm even willing to go out as far as say that Jesus even loved Pilate. Yes, we must love. We must love our neighbors as ourselves. Who is my neighbor? Everyone. We are all neighbors. We are in a global community. We are in a national community. We are all neighbors and we need to love each other. We need to take action. Our journeys are not just our journeys alone. Our journeys are not selfish journeys that we can navigate without thought or care about something or someone else. That's not why we were put on this planet. We were put here for such a time as this to do what must be done, to proclaim love, grace, mercy, forgiveness for all people. We weren't here to proclaim selfishness, self-centeredness, me, myself, and I. No, we are communal creatures that look out for each other, or that are designed to look out for each other. And if we don't, there is something wrong with our hearts. There are things that we need to come to terms with. We need to turn our backs and walk away from this toxic individualism that is so rampant in our community, that plays a role in not addressing situations of injustice and violence and just lets the cycle continue. We need to be done. So, my friends, what are you going to do besides offering thoughts and prayers this week to help end the cycle of violence, to hopefully play a role in making sure that another school shooting does not happen? What are you going to do? This is one of the things I'm going to do. I'm going to publish this podcast knowing that there will be people that disagree with me, and maybe I'll lose some listeners. Maybe I'll upset some people, and I'm sorry. As my wife in her sermon today said, if we want to make a difference and a change in this world, we got to get comfortable in making others uncomfortable. Even with all that. Even if you disagree with me, even if I've ticked you off by what I've said today, I want you to know this. You are loved. You are valued. You matter. You can make a difference. You can change the world.